Welcome back to the Rockies Now podcast. I am your host, Steve Cross, and today we're going to be talking about the Texas Rangers signing former Rockies pitcher Jon Gray. Some of you have been wondering why I haven't been releasing some of my podcasts normally. The reason for that is I've been pretty much taking a break, right? Like a lot of people are during the Christmas holiday, but also the lockout. I mean, there's some stuff to talk about at the same time, though. There's not a lot of baseball going around, as you know. So we're going to be talking about Jon Gray, just give my thoughts on that. And I know some of you guys might want to hear, and some of you guys were asking me to talk about it, so I'll talk about it for you guys. So I have the article that MLB.com wrote a few weeks ago when Jon Gray was moved to the Rangers. So I will read a little bit of that to you guys. But yeah, if you guys are new to the channel, feel free to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and this is for my YouTube page, but if you're following on Spotify or whatever, I appreciate it. Appreciate your guys' support. But anyway, let's get started. This was the article written a few weeks ago. The Rangers took a big step toward addressing the need within the rotation, signing pitcher Jon Gray to a 4-year deal, the team announced on Wednesday. Gray's signing was the third major announcement for the day for the Rangers after they announced long-term deals with infielders Corey Seager and Marcus Semien. Terms of Gray's deal weren't announced, but a source told MLB.com that the contract is worth $56 million. Gray, going into his 30-year season, or 30 years old, in other words, has spent his entire career with the Rockies after being drafted third overall in the 2013 MLB draft out of the University of Oklahoma. He has posted a 4.59 ERA, and then they have in parentheses here on the website 107 ERA plus and a 134 WHIP over 829 and a third innings in his career. Since 2016, his first full big league season, Gray has been among the National League leaders in innings pitched, which is 788 and 2/3, 809 strikeouts, and 53 wins. During that time, he's posted a 4.54 ERA and a 1.08 ERA plus. Unlike most pitchers, Gray pitched better at the Rockies' home of Coors Field than on the road, posting a 4.02 home ERA and a 5.22 road ERA in 2021. So just to start it all off, a few weeks ago, I think a lot of Rockies fans, including myself, were having a tough time hearing the news that a Rockies legend starting pitcher, perhaps one of the best starting pitchers in Rockies history, was moved to the Texas Rangers. Well, he wasn't traded, but the Rockies pretty much didn't re-sign him, didn't trade him, which they should have at the trade deadline. They should have traded Story and Gray. That's something I'll also talk about in my Trevor Story podcast. I hope to do soon. And I'm trying to catch up on some of my projects I'm behind, so forgive me on that. But the Rockies, they didn't trade Trevor Story or Jon Gray, which they should have. And the Rockies, they did give Jon Gray a deal at the end of the 2021 season, which we didn't find out until a few weeks after the season ended. But Jon Gray reportedly rejected the offer. I believe it was like 3 years or something. And it was actually a good deal. But Jon Gray chose to decline it and said that he wanted to test out free agency. And then he, when he moved, or when he decided that he was going to go to Texas, he said that going to Texas was his decision and that he wanted to move on from the Rockies. But he also said that he was very thankful for the Rockies and had no regrets, playing in Colorado. But hearing that news was definitely troubling as a Rockies fan. And, I love Jon Gray. Jon Gray was my favorite Rockies pitcher. I have a lot of guys on my list I like, and Jon Gray was one of those guys that I liked. I just liked his, I kind of wish he could have kept his long hair. He looked so cool in that. I remember when he first came up, he was kind of growing it, and then once it became longer, like in 2018, he kind of reminded me of a Jacob deGrom type of guy with his hair. I felt like he was going toward that type of vibe, but obviously Jon Gray didn't do well that year. And that's one thing I want to talk about. Jon Gray, I liked him, but he was just inconsistent. And I agree that the Rockies did not do a good job at all in trying to deal with him, whether to trade him or either give him a deal that could have worked and have him stay with the Rockies. But as you see here, Jon Gray, the thing that will hurt the Rockies the most is that he was really good at home. I mean, the ERA is not so pretty, 4.02 home ERA at Coors Field, but he knew how to pitch in Coors Field, which not a lot of pitchers know how to do that anymore these days. Well, ever. I mean, in the history of Coors Field, not a lot of pitchers knew how to pitch there. Jon Gray was one of those guys that knew how to pitch there, and that's a pretty special guy. The thing that I think the Rockies were concerned about was his road ERA, which, as I said earlier, was a 5.22 road ERA. That's not so good. There's a lot of places he didn't pitch well, and I think one of them was Chase Field in Arizona. We all remember his 2017 wildcard performance. That wasn't so good. I just felt like Jon Gray, and it makes sense, Jon Gray wasn't good on the road, and I think maybe that's one of the reasons why the Rockies were like, you know what, we're not going to give him a qualifying offer. He's not, we love him, but he's not worth the $18 million for one years. I mean, we could have kept him, but the Rockies, maybe they're trying to do something. I don't know. And again, this is something to talk about in my next podcast, but the Rockies offered Trevor Story a qualifying offer, but not to Jon Gray, and a lot of people were like, huh? So we're going to talk about that later on in another podcast. But, I can see why the Rockies maybe passed on Jon Gray on bringing him back, because it's just like the Rockies, they want, they feel like they want to focus on some more of their younger guys like Rolleson and Ashton Godot and Peter Lambert, which makes sense because Peter Lambert, by the way, a few years ago, was the Rockies' #1 pitching prospect. So, and then it was Peter Lambert who came up in 2019. Wait, did I say Peter Lambert? I meant Ryan Rolleson, who is currently the #1 pitching prospect for the Rockies, who could make his debut this year. I think he will, but I don't think he will be the #5 starter. I mean, we'll see. We'll see what he does in spring training, but the Rockies have some holes to fill because, you just lost a guy that knew how to pitch at Coors Field, who was second in all time for the Rockies in strikeouts behind, I believe, Jorge De La Rosa, if I'm correct. I don't think it was Ubaldo Jimenez. I think it was Jorge De La Rosa. But I mean, you're taking a look at the top two guys to ever pitch at Coors Field was Jorge De La Rosa and Jon Gray, and you're losing a pretty good pitcher. But you take a look at Jorge De La Rosa when he left Colorado. It was like, he was pretty much the same, if not a little bit worse, because I mean he was getting older. Jon Gray, he's 30 years old, or he's going into his age 30 season. I'm not going to say he's not going to be as good, but I do think that his best years were in Colorado. But also, he pitched better. His stats show it that he pitched better in high altitude places. And I'm not saying that he's not going to pitch well in Texas, but I do think that there's a possibility that he might not pitch as well as he was in a Colorado Rockies uniform. But I still want to wish him the best. I hope he does extremely well in Texas. Hope that he can figure things out there in Texas and, help them possibly win a championship in the next few years. But I don't think they're going to be there yet. Obviously, this year I think they're still going to be learning and growing in their minor league system. But I think the Rangers will be a little bit better, but I still don't think they're going to be a playoff team. But yeah, I just want to give Jon Gray the best, and because he was one of my favorites on the Rockies. But losing him will be difficult, but I don't think it will be as bad as what people may think. And I think a lot of people are like, "Oh, the Rockies are the worst team in Major League Baseball," and all that type of stuff. Maybe the Rockies have a plan here, and going into this offseason, it's kind of difficult. But at the same time, though, I gotta trust the Rockies have a plan, and maybe they don't have a plan, and that's the Rockies. That's what they're doing, and it's not my fault, So, but yeah, I mean, if you're a Texas Ranger fan, all I gotta say is, congratulations on getting a great pitcher. But at the same time, though, keep your eyes out. His ERA on the road again, not so good. Keep your ERA, low at home. Hopefully for him, he gets to keep that ERA low. But I don't know. He just was a better pitcher at Coors Field, so we'll see. And then talking about over the last few minutes that we have, talking about what the Rockies need to do to fill in the number 5 rotation spot, because most likely it's going to move up, right, from Marquez, probably going to be Freeland, and then Senzatella, and then Gomber, and then the question is who's going to be the number 5. There's a few guys that are on my mind. I think Ashton Goudeau is one of them. He had a pretty good start in his last start against the Diamondbacks. It was actually, a matter of fact, the last game of the 2021 season. He actually pitched pretty well it was a bullpen day for the Rockies, and he did pretty well. I think he could be a possibility to be a number 5 starter. I mean, we'll see in spring training. Another guy is Peter Lambert. Obviously, he had 2 starts. He didn't do so well in those 2 starts, but he's coming back from a Tommy John surgery, so you can't really blame him for that. I mean, Peter Lambert, he had some flashes of some good stuff in 2019. I mean, if you remember his debut in Chicago, I mean, he was electric. I mean, on the mound, the Cubs couldn't hit him, and he had a great debut. I think there's a lot to be excited for in Peter Lambert, and so I think, as of right now, if I had to bet $1, it'd probably be Peter Lambert, but we'll see. And then you got Ryan Rolleson, who personally I don't think he's ready to start in big league games yet. He struggled this year in the minor leagues. I think he was all year he was in AAA. He might have played a little bit of AA. I might be wrong on that, but he wasn't so good this year. But obviously, you got to remember 2020 there was no minor leagues simply because of COVID and all that type of stuff. But I simply believe that Rolleson is not ready. It will probably take another, year for him to come up. But we'll see. So I got Lambert, Rolleson, and then Goudeau. And then there's Ryan Feltner, who I was actually really excited about. I mean, he had a much better start in Philadelphia. He only had 2 starts in 2021 later in the season. Because of Austin Gomber, he was injured the last month or 2 of the year. But, Ryan Feltner could be the possibility. And I think for him, he's going to be a little bit more comfortable. However, the Rockies could put him back into AA or AAA. So there's some options here. I don't think, and again, I'll talk about this in another podcast. I have a lot more podcasts to work on, by the way. So keep your eyes out for that. But I think the Rockies are probably going to skip on getting a free agent starting pitcher once the lockout ends. And I think they're just going to go toward one of those guys and save some money, which is, I think, a much safer option. But, I mean, I wouldn't be upset if we got somebody for a 1-year deal, 1 or 2 year deal. So, but yeah, the Rockies, no question, have a huge hole to fill, but it's not as huge what people may think. It's difficult, but I've moved on from Jon Gray. I'm excited for some of our younger guys as well, but, again, the Rockies are going to have to look at some of the numbers that they're going to have to fill in. Hopefully one of these younger guys, whether it be Rolleson, Lambert, Goudeau, Feltner, they're going to have to fill some good sized shoes here in the rotation. But I still think the rotation is going to be good, but you're going to have to rely on, Freeland to have a better year. I mean, he had a good year in 2021. It wasn't bad, especially in the second half. Freeland was really, really good. But you're going to have to rely on Senzatella to step it up a little bit. Gomber's going to have to remain like what he was in 2021. That's not a tall order, but you got to hope that he has another good season. And then Marquez, he's the stronghold of that rotation. He's the ace, obviously. So we're going to keep our eyes on that, see what the Rockies do. Again, we're 2 weeks in the lockout. I might mention this in my next podcast whenever I do it, but the lockout might not be as long as what people may think, and I'll explain more about that. But I guess we'll see what the Rockies will do. Again, I don't expect them to get a free agent starting pitcher. I think they're going to go toward one of the younger guys. So anyway, that's my thoughts on the whole Jon Gray situation. Disappointed, yes, but I think I'm excited for what our younger guys have in the future. If you enjoyed this podcast episode, make sure to hit that like button. If you want to share it, feel free to do that. I appreciate you guys coming on in today and listening to this podcast. Next time I'll be talking about Trevor Story and the offseason for the Rockies. Appreciate it. Hope you have a great day, and hope you guys have a Merry Christmas. Peace out.